Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Bridgem Indonesia webinar series, Business Needs for Property, Global and Consumer Trends Shift Demand. I'm Asti, Events Coordinator at Bridgem Indonesia. Joining us today are our two distinguished panelists, Rivan Munansa, Director of Industrial and Logistics Services at Colliers International Indonesia, and Woenardi, Managing Director at Cikarang Dry Port. Today's session will be moderated by Rivan, the Executive Director of Bridgem Indonesia. And before we start, allow me to review the functionality of this webinar. Please be informed that today's webinar is being recorded, and we will be able to share a link with you when it's available after this webinar is completed. All participants will be muted to avoid background noises that may distract you from listening to this webinar, and also to enable our panelists to present without interruption. And if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box at any time. It is at the bottom center of your screen. And we will have time for Q&A session at the end to answer your questions. Okay, now I'm going to hand the screen over to Rivan to start today's webinar.
Thank you very much, Asti. Very good afternoon to everybody that's on the Asia side, and on the western side of the pond, a very good morning to people, particularly those who are booked in, checked in from the UK. It's a particular pleasure to welcome you to this webinar. This is the 16th webinar in our series now since April the 7th. So we've been very busy in providing relevant information, insights, updates for our members, insights that represent possible solutions to some of the challenges that absolutely everybody is facing at the moment. In previous webinars where there's been a property focus, we've looked at retail, we've also looked at office tenancies, but this is the first time we've had a look in particular more at the industrial and commercial estate side. And it gives me great pleasure in that regard to welcome Rivan Munansa, who's the Director of Industrial and Logistics Services at Colliers. And in just a moment, Rivan will give his update by way of a brief presentation. We're also joined by Woenardi, who's the Managing Director of Cikarang Dry Port. And of course, it's often the infrastructure that's available to industrial facilities that make them attractive, and we'll be talking to Benny about that. And from a British Chamber point of view, very much so in the context of, are we ready to woo some of those businesses that are in China at the moment that do not want to commit to expansion in China, or indeed are looking for diversification of their supply chain? Is Indonesia ready to woo them to Indonesia? So we'll be talking about that as well. As mentioned by Asti, we're going to have a very informal chat show style. You've got the opportunity to post some questions. We will invite some of you up to ask those questions personally if it's possible with your technology. But in the first instance, I'd like to pass the baton to Rivan for his presentation on this subject of business needs for property, global and consumer trends, and the shift in demand. Rivan.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris, for giving the introduction. Let me start the presentation about industrial. Yeah, as you can see, I mean, lately people are talking about what's going on with the market, and then some of the sectors are impacted, you know, for example, like office and everything. There is a contraction in demand and everything. And then retail probably is the sector that being impacted, you know, directly. But actually, in overall, industrial is actually, even though there is a distraction at the beginning, but I think in the future, still in a good, you know, good demand, and in the long term is still in good shape. So let's start with the agenda. I'm going to talk about what's going on with the market. for industrial, logistics, this is the first quarter, and this is actually right before the COVID happened in March. So let's start. Maybe I just gave an idea of what's going on with the mapping of the industrial estate in Greater Jakarta, which is, if you see in Cikarang, it's basically for the heavy industry and like chemicals, steel, smelters, you know, very heavy. And then if you go to Tangerang, it's more for the, you know, a lot of labor intensive type, you know, like garment, textile in Tangerang area. But lately we start hearing in the market that actually there is a shifting from them since the minimum wage is quite high. So we start hearing a lot of news that all of these labor intensive type of factory, they move to Central Java, which is over there the UMR is about 50% what's in Greater Jakarta. And then you go along to Jakarta, basically the government already, you know, encourage people in factory in Jakarta to go out from the Jakarta. And then on the south part is not much industrial estates. And then you go to Bekasi and Karawang, where all the basically a lot of automotive center in this area, together with the consumer goods and different type of industry. And then if you see the first quarter, I mean, the IS is representing the industrial estates. So you have several industrial estates, like in Cikarang, 3 industrial estates, Tangerang, 6 industrial estates. But I just would like to highlight, if you see from the yellow one is the existing stock, and the blue one is actually the remaining unsold land. So you can see actually there is, you know, even there is a potential supply in Cikarang and Tangerang area, but actually the remaining unsold land is almost run out of stock, you know. And then if you go to Bekasi and Karawang, you can see that, especially if you see the yellow one, actually the existing stock is really a lot, but again, the availability, the remaining unsold land is low, and the potential to be developed still there, but it will take some time to also supply to the market. As a result of that one, and then we all know that Bekasi, Karawang right now also the land price is already increased. So in the future, the way we look at it is there is a future expansion, which is right now government is already start constructing the Patimban port, and that will be helping the logistics from Bekasi and Karawang, in which they don't have to go to Jakarta, but they can go through the Subang area and go to Patimban port. But this is really 100% rely on the infrastructure that will be completed from Patimban to the Cipali toll road. As you can see, in terms of the performance from 2006 to 2019, actually we have the picking up in 2010 to around 2013 and 2014. And then after that is going a bit down and flat. And actually in 2019, it's about to picking up. But then in beginning of the 2020, there is this COVID-19 happened. So as you can see, I mean, 56 hectares only sold in first quarter 2020, which is only representing 16% of the total sales compared to last year. You know. But I'm not really, negative on this one, because what's going on is a lot of companies are adjusted during the COVID period for the SOP, like working from home, and then all the how they shift, they adjust with the situation. So it's actually that's preventing the sales, booked in second quarter 2020. And then as you can see, the first quarter, we still see automotive like 40%, but of course this is not representing the whole market because the demand at that time is low. But you can see also food is actually growing, and I would say consumer goods is still in a good shape. In terms of the rental, you can see as this is back to back with the performance, that there is a big jump from 2010 to around 2014, and then become flat, during this period until 2017, and then going down a bit, and then is about to go back again, but then because of this COVID, then it becomes flat again. Now we move to the other sector, which is logistics. That's the industrial or the manufacturing performance. If you can see the logistics, this is the area of the logistics, which is, if you see the blue one, is actually the high demand for logistic requirement, in which actually you have a lot of different type of requirement for logistics. If you are doing more on the import, then you probably will be located in Marunda or Cakung area, because that's very close to the seaport in Tanjung Priok. But on the other hand, if you go and supply the manufacturer, then you probably more located in the Bekasi and Karawang area, because that serves the manufacturers. And then the other one is the potential in the market is like e-commerce, and there is still a very big room to increase in the future, as comparable if you see in China. Then it's actually the high demand of area for e-commerce, usually at the south or in the Bekasi area. But I think everywhere closer to the city will be the area, the target area for e-commerce. Of course, the challenge is the land price is already expensive compared to in the industrial area such as Cikarang and Karawang. Okay, if you can see the warehouse supply is actually mostly are located in Bekasi, and Bekasi itself consists of Marunda, which is really close to a seaport, Bekasi city as well, and then Cibitung, Cikarang. This is why Bekasi is become the high supply for warehouse. Is because Bekasi, like Cibitung area, they can serve both. They can serve the logistics. They can serve the closer for the import from the seaport, and they also can serve the manufacturer, which is located in Cikarang and Karawang. And then if you can see that actually the occupancy rate is pretty healthy from 2016 to 2020, pretty much, until 2019 is actually 90%. And then why in 2020 drop is because just recently there's a big developer completed a big parcel of warehouse, and that entering to the supply in the market. But on the other hand, there is a bit slow in regards to this COVID-19 happen. But in overall, we still be very positive that actually the logistics is pretty healthy. Okay, so what's happened after the with this first quarter, for the industrial and logistics? This is based on our observation as a consultant. The first one that really hit the most is automotive. Because I think there's a big drop, especially in May. I heard some news. They mentioned maybe drop even like 90%. And of course, the other one, like the supplier to the automotive, like steel or the spare parts, also, affected by that. But on the other hand, we heard, like e-commerce is actually growing. They suddenly need space to occupy, and it's quite a significant size. They're talking about 18,000 square meter, maybe expandable to 20,000 square meter. So it's quite significant. And then during the pandemic, even the e-commerce, I mean, in terms of the negotiation, they don't really have get impact. They just keep on going on the negotiation and basically finalizing everything. So I see there's a really potential in the e-commerce, and then data center as well. A lot of, I think, parties start to try to survey the area and everything. Even though, I mean, the criteria is quite difficult. You should have a constant power supply, and then there should be flood free and everything. So I think, but as a backbone of the e-commerce business, I mean, data center is something that really potential, for that to be grow, And then the other one is consumer goods. Surprisingly, I don't see any impact on consumer goods. In fact, they still have planning to expand, and their sales also not really affected much. Is probably only temporary. And then the last one is actually the potential growth. This is based on what we heard in the market, that in China there is an interest that all factories, a lot of factories, are thinking of moving out from China. And one of them is we heard about pharmaceutical. And the other one as well, I see like personal healthcare. I think this is also will be increased. And the last one is actually high tech, I think, because we are talking now, government always talking about 4.0, industry 4.0, in which currently probably Indonesia only at the level of 2.0. So I think with this kind of affected by this pandemic, I think it's more and more factories start thinking of do more on automation, and then to maximize their manufacture. So that's, I think, in general. So in summary, actually, if you're asking about the industrial, yes, there is an impact at the beginning, but it seems like in the long run, still in a good shape. And there is some area, some sectors that will hit, but most of it, I think, still pretty healthy, and then the trend is still going up. So hopefully the diagram can catch up with the last year. I think that's pretty much from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rivan. I think your slides were excellent. I think you've crystallized some of the themes. And after we've heard from Benny, I'd like to go back and talk a little bit more about the domestic geography of the industrial land that's available, look more into why consumers are moving, not consumers, manufacturers and others are moving. And other than money, because you did mention the minimum wage, other than money, what are the other factors that are causing them to think about a move and deciding on a move? But first, as mentioned in my introduction, of course, having the industrial land and having the right price is very important, but actually companies are also very, very keen to understand that the infrastructure is there to support their supply chain in particular, the components that they need, and so on. Benny is with us as Managing Director of Cikarang Dry Port. And I'd just like to invite him for just 2 or 3 minutes to explain to anybody for whom it's not clear what exactly is a dry port and how did the concept develop to where it is now. Benny.
Thank you, Pak Chris. Hi, everybody. Yeah, just a brief actually. Dry port actually is a similar like a port, international port actually, and we are connected to the Tanjung Priok International Port by rail and also by land. So now, if you are, for easy to understand, if you want to import container and export container from overseas to Indonesia, usually you end up in Jakarta Port, Tanjung Priok Port. But today you can choose actually the bill of lading. You want to stop in the seaport or you want to stop in the dry port. So now the customer have option. If you are industrial surrounding the dry port, meaning it's more efficient, it's more faster when you do the custom clearance in the dry port. In the same also for the export processing. If you are surrounding the dry port, it's more easy for you actually to processing all the export. Then we are deliver actually is already in the bonded transfer, we call it. So on the way, custom actually supervise, and we're using all the technology, the electronic seal, we call it, to guarantee to the custom of Republic Indonesia that the container is not going to everybody, but it's directly to the seaport. So I think yeah, this is the dry port actually in Indonesia. Actually, we are the first dry port concept in Asia. We are international with a international ID port in Asia.
Thank you very much, Benny. Benny, to what extent has this new concept taken off? When I say new, it's newer. To what extent has it taken off? What demand have you had? And how much difference do you think that your location has made, for example, and impacted the demand for around Bekasi and those other areas that Rivan was talking about?
Yeah. Okay. So today we are already running almost 8 years in the operation. So of course it's not in the day one, first year. Everything is already been given by the government, but gradually, because government also we are under supervising of the custom and also the quarantine. So both of the government agency office they are already have in Cikarang, surrounding the dry port. Infrastructure, we also own our own train station now in Cikarang for container, and then highway also already connected to directly to the highway. So this infrastructure is step by step is being built, and yeah, planning also with the government. So what it makes the idea actually the dry port in the Cikarang or Bekasi area or near to the Karawang area, because we see a lot of the industry development in that area. But all the way, if Pak Rivan explained, we have the industry in the west, we have industry in the east, we have the industry in the south. But both of this kind of industry, they must go along the way to the seaport and must pass the Jakarta city. So this make it something is abnormal for the traffic, because you must planning very carefully. And if you know well the operation in the seaport, we don't only have the one terminal in the Tanjung Priok. We have 5 terminal with a different terminal operator. So they have 5 gates in Tanjung Priok. So you can imagine how to manage this kind of traffic is across to the seaport. But today with the technology, the IoT, we already have the paperless between the terminal and also with our terminal, including the custom procedure and also quarantine, and including the payment and also the billing, all in one thing just put into our application, including also the bill of lading, electronic bill of lading from the shipping line.
Thanks, Benny. I think we all know that Indonesian customs have not necessarily been the most progressive institution for businesses to work with. And I'd just like to ask, just how have they responded to the collaboration with you and Cikarang Dry Port? Because this represents change, albeit you said over the last 8 years. But how willing were they to embrace the change? And what is the relationship now between your organization and customs? Because that needs to be quite sweet, doesn't it, for your clients and for everything to work well for the industrial estates?
They're very supporting, Pak Chris. Of course, in the first years, everybody needs to take the changes because the changes is not easy. But after we show to them actually how the things actually can be changed to the technology, and rather than the human, actually they are very good anticipating and also supporting us. For example, when we start the operation, there is no custom office in Cikarang. The custom surrounding that area, industrial area, don't familiar with the import procedure or export procedure. What they familiar is a bonded facility, meaning it's a bonded factory, bonded warehouse. But after that, they taking some people outside from Tanjung Priok, from Batam, actually moving to Cikarang and develop their own office in Cikarang. This is very, very supporting to us. And the willingness to change that is very progressive from the custom organization.
Thank you. As a business organization, I think that's very reassuring to hear your comments and feedback in response to that question. Rivan, I'd like to go back, if I may, to some of the observations that you have made. You referred to the fact that the more heavy manufacturing has retreated in the COVID situation, automotive particularly hit. Does your organization, Colliers, do you have any sense of how long it may take and when this more heavy manufacturing might actually bounce back?
Okay, thank you, Chris. I think it depends on, because I think every people are now adjusted to the, to the new normal life, in which right now, I think people are still, really busy with the procedure and everything, But I think once we got, adapted with the situation, then I think slowly, I think the demand will go back, because right now is the reason why people don't buy the car, because they cannot go everywhere. But I think once government open, and then we still can go out, even though following the procedure, then I think slowly then the demand will be back, But for sure, it's not gonna be like instantly happen. That's in my opinion.
Okay. Thank you, Rivan. And referring to that same slide, you put in the middle line, I recall, demand for IT and tech-related things starting to come up. I'd like to invite Fatmi Fakhri, to ask their question, because this particular question relates to Indonesia's readiness to embrace high tech. So Fakhri Dwi Rama, if you'd like to take yourself off mute, if you'd like to also release your video camera, please, this is your chance to ask the question directly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. So hello everyone. So yeah, the question for me, because I'm a consultant in Surbana Jurong, and then we have several projects in industrial estates, and then some of our clients also talking about the high-tech industrial, because they want to, since now the government talking about industrial 4.0. So is there any insight there? yes, now several developers start to think about this high-tech industrial, to bring in high-tech industrial. But then the question from my side is how ready we, at least the government, to support this high-tech industrial, especially for these developers. Because yeah, you know, high-tech industrials is involving with the, well, if I'm not mistaken, last time the only providers that has this license for IoT, it's only Indosat and Telkomsel, yeah, if I'm not mistaken. But then I'm not sure whether they are ready for the infrastructure.
Okay, so this is referring specifically to IoT, 5G, and so on. Rivan, any thoughts in response to that, please?
Yeah, actually, the 4.0 is already, you know, being discussed with the government and everything. Is always we heard about industry 4.0, but unfortunately, right now, as I mentioned in my presentation, is now we are only 2.0. You know, so meaning that there are still a lot of things to catch up. You know, in terms of the infrastructure. Even though, I mean, that's something, that's a good idea, but I think, in my opinion, will take some time to achieve the in terms of the infrastructure to 5G and everything. Yeah, honestly. Yeah.
Okay, so not ready yet, work in progress, still an awful lot to do.
Yeah.
So going back to this issue of China, I mean, 2 or 3 years ago, everybody thought that Indonesia would compete for the business of those companies that were looking to diversify their expansion. In the end, what we know is that actually Indonesia performed very poorly in acquiring those businesses, and in most cases lost out to Vietnam. How ready is Indonesia now? And I'd really like to invite both of you to comment on that. But yourself, Rivan, first. How ready is Indonesia to really compete with the likes of Vietnam in terms of manufacturing and industrial capability?
Yeah. Okay. Actually, if you compare with Vietnam, I mean, in my opinion, I mean, Indonesia is more attractive because the market is much bigger than Vietnam, you know. And last time, I think there's concern as well for companies or factories to be set up in Vietnam because the political situation, you know, in Vietnam, you know, because as a communist country, you know. But you know, I think Vietnam is successfully give an incentive to the to investors, you know, and most of the type of industry that I understand is related to labor intensive, you know. So it's like shoes manufacturing or garment, you know, textile, you know, and in which it is happened is because in China slowly the minimum wage also increasing, you know, because the middle class increase, you know. So then I think Vietnam give you know, enough incentive for the first wave that come from China. Instead of their manufacture in China, they just shifting to Vietnam. While in Indonesia, as you know, that is case by case, and there is no really, you know, tax holiday being proposed, you know, to the investors. But for the second times, when I heard about this, I mean, we all heard about the rumors that will be go from China going to Brebes and everything, you know, is already floating in the newspaper, you know. I think for the second one, I mean, the second wave, I think government really doesn't want to lose, you know, against Vietnam. You know. I believe the government will do everything they can, you know, to catch the investor here, because in terms of the infrastructure, you know, in terms of the with what happened right now, the massive infrastructure, you know, the toll road, the connectivity, even because of this connectivity and also because of this COVID, you know, it's actually the logistic cost is going down, you know, currently, because less traffic and then connectivity is good, you know. So I believe, and I start also hearing, you know, like in, for example, like in special economic zone, you know, there will be, you know, like a tax-free, possible tax-free, you know, and for a certain, you know, industry, there will be a tax holiday for 5 years, and then you got like 50% on the 6th and 7th year, you know. So I think government is really seriously, you know, thinking of, you know, of getting these investors, you know. And I think if that happen, I think we actually should be more attractive compared to other countries, you know, like Vietnam. I think that's my opinion.
Okay, thanks. I'd just like to add in a slightly different angle for you, Benny, to add your comments to that. The economies of, or rather the financial competitiveness of Indonesia is actually perhaps not in places like Bekasi and so on. As we've heard, the minimum wage is much lower, half in Central Java. There are also similar incentives and lower property prices in East Java. But do those cost competitive environments also have the same type of infrastructure as is being offered by Cikarang dry port into the West Java areas of Bekasi?
Yes, thank you, Pak Chris. So let me add on one of our research last time when we do in Vietnam, back on the, I think it's 5 years ago, including with the Textile Association and so on, with the several association it's been working, because we are on the demand actually to establish the what we call it the free trade zone warehouse in Indonesia. 5 years ago, we don't have this kind of the revolutionary regulation actually. Compared to Singapore or Malaysia, they already been doing for decades actually in there. So what we found actually, our logistic cost is more competitive compared to Vietnam. But what is the poor in us actually is the bureaucracy. Because when you coming as an investor, you're dealing with so many posts of the minister posts in Indonesia. Similar like when we established also in the dry port. But I think this is the past, and the government is working very hard to reduce the number of the paper bureaucracy that would be attractive for the investor. For example, in Kota Jababeka, that we are our dry port is located. Actually, it's very easy when we're coming as an investor, and we have also the client. International client actually is been using our international free trade zone warehouse. We call it the PLB in Cikarang. Now they do the export to Vietnam from our warehouse. So all the raw material coming to this warehouse, no pay tax. You can do the simple assembly and then you can do the export. So now it's already happened. So compared to 5 years ago, we are progressive. That's why I say the custom is very, very revolutionary in this kind of the things actually, to the technology, IoT, and so on. So what we are ready or not? For my perception, we are ready. In our industrial, in Kota Jababeka industrial park, actually, all is connected to the fiber optic compared to 2 years ago. And Cikarang Dry Port actually is a pioneer on that area. We put it the fiber optic. So today we are quite easy to do the exchanges, all the data, and including the payment and billing. I believe this kind of the models actually we can duplicate to the other industrial zone in Central Java or in East Java. So it's make it the more punctual time and also the calculation for the costs when they investing in Indonesia.
Okay, that's Benny. That's good to know that things can be replicated, but it also suggests that we're not ready. And you said it's taken the evolution of Cikarang dry port has taken 8 years. How long is it going to take in somewhere like Central Java and East Java?
I think it's not more than 2 years if you want to duplicate.
Okay, fine. Thanks very much for that. We have Peter Fanning. Peter, if you'd like to unmute yourselves. For those that don't know, for many years, Peter has headed up the IBC, the International Business Chamber. And Peter has a question that he'd like to direct to Benny.
Hi, Benny.
Hi, Peter.
How are you all? Just a simple practical question. As you know, I've been in touch with Woenardi over the years with following the development of the dry port. Do you have a direct rail and toll road connection to Tanjung Priok yet? And secondly, are the same connections starting to be developed to Patimban?
Thank you, Peter, for the question. Yes, now we already have the direct connection for the railway and also the highway.
Okay.
So the last time, the highway is only, if you go to Cikarang, it's only kilometer 31.
Yeah.
Today, we already have 3 gates from the main highway. And the Cikampek highway actually already use the elevated highway also, when you can use directly to Bandung.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and the track actually, the railway connection behind of our dry port, which is our own station, is connecting to the dry port. We have the longest station, about 1.2 kilometers. The track only dedicated for container. Okay. And connecting to the inside the Tanjung Priok between GICT and Koja terminal.
Yeah, yeah. And are you developing in the opposite direction to the new port? Is that that connection been started yet?
Yeah, we've been approaching actually from 3 years ago with the Japanese consultant.
Yeah,
a few of them, and how we can connect the railway actually to the new port.
Yeah.
Because as you know, if we are waiting the highway development to connecting the new port is taking some time.
Yeah, sure.
Especially for a land issue. Yeah.
Yeah, understand. I was just curious. It's certainly come a long way, perhaps a long time, but you've. I know that it's only come about with persistent lobbying on yours and Pak Woenardi's part.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you for joining us, Peter. I'd like us to stay on this theme of examining and contrasting with Vietnam and how successful it has been and its readiness. I think everybody would agree there have been significant improvements from Indonesia with regard to the bureaucracy, regulations and so on. Still a long way to go, but there's no better way than to actually listen to somebody else's recent experience in relation to actually relocating or setting up in Vietnam. Frank Finlow joins us, and Frank, if you'd like to unmute yourself and if you feel inclined, put your camera on as well. Frank Finlow is somebody that has been involved directly with setting something up in Vietnam. Frank.
Yes, Chris, thanks for that. Just to clarify, it was not a project I was taking a lead role to set up. It was an existing operation that was being expanded to include a retail portion in an existing location. But my first venture in Vietnam was 15 odd years ago, and to say that going back to the same location, this is in Hanoi, or a bit north of Hanoi, a place called Bac Ninh. They have developed 2 brand new real estate, industrial estates, and split 60% for manufacturing, 40% for warehousing. And the second phase of Bac Ninh 2 was almost fully booked. So clearly they have taken a very aggressive stance to bring operations in, and doing a reasonably, well, I say a pretty good job. They're struggling with the same issues that's happening in Indonesia, and that's about increasing minimum wage, skill shortage of people. But for the heavy person demand and everything else, they seem to be doing a really good job. But having spent a bit of time in Indonesia also, I can say that the completion of the latest infrastructure projects will definitely put Indonesia back on track to compete with Vietnam. In my experience is both workforce-wise, certainly the Indonesian workforce, I don't know how to say this politically correctly, but the Indonesian workforce is more adaptable to change. And in northern Vietnam, the folks there are not quite as progressive as in Ho Chi Minh City either. But I just sense that this development that's ongoing even as we speak to brand new estates in East Java, outside of Surabaya, Lamongan and places like that. If they get a rail spur which designed to take pressure from Surabaya port, I think the opportunity is immense.
Okay, thank you very much, Frank. Benny, Rivan, would you like to comment?
Hi, Frank. How are you, Frank?
Hello, Benny.
How is Bali?
How are you, mate?
Yeah, thank you, Frank, for the comment. Actually, we have been studying from 5 years ago about the Vietnam, and why we are come out with a solid master plan in the dry port, actually, with not only the port but also the cluster of the logistic park. We call it the logistic park. Today, we surrounding of the dry port, we have around 120,000 up to 150,000 square meter of the warehouse is occupied. So that's the cluster. And behind the big cluster is the industrial. We are surrounding the industrial estate. That's why the connectivity that Peter asked in the beginning, that is our concern in the beginning, because we need to connecting the track also from the port to our industrial, to the dry port. And also now, the track is already connecting to Surabaya, to East Java and Central Java. So we have also the domestic train running every day to schedule from Cikarang to Surabaya and Surabaya to Cikarang.
Okay, thanks for that update, Benny. Rivan, I know you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I think I just want to add on the Frank comments. I do agree, you know, like in Surabaya itself, also there is a big development, you know, in terms of the industrial estates, as well as the infrastructure, you know, like Lamongan, Gresik, you know, and Surabaya. So I think what's happened is not only in Greater Jakarta, which is maybe 10 years ago, we are only talking about Cikarang, Bekasi, you know, that's the only area that we are talking about, you know. But now I think for East Indonesia, there's also a massive development in industrial estates and then the infrastructure also in Surabaya area, you know. So that's really positive, I think. And then with the connectivity right now, there is a, you know, Cipali can be connected directly with Surabaya. I mean, that's really helping the logistic cost to go down, you know, instead of very high cost, you know, like before. I think that's my, according to me.
So we're hearing some positive things, aren't we? Cost competitiveness is there. Frank intimated that the Indonesian workforce is more versatile, so that's competitive advantage as well. Infrastructure's on its way. Bureaucratic issues are getting easier, but I think on bureaucratic and infrastructure, still a lot of work in progress needs to be done. So all of that's very positive. And we also know that that there are, through the special economic zones, different sorts of tax incentives as well that are going to help Indonesia compete. I think the big question is going to be, are we able to compete properly almost now, because the opportunity is now. I think that's one that we can discuss in future webinars. What I would like to ask Rivan, you showed from 2016 to 2020 a steady increase in demand for industrial land. But the first part of my question is, who is the demand coming from? Is it international demand or is it domestic demand?
During that period is actually from domestic and outside, but the big jump is 2010 to 2014 is 100% outside and really driven by the automotive, you know. So once the automotive came in, a lot of the vendors and supplier came in as well. So there's a massive, you know, going into the market, you know. And then after that is the existing one, and then they need to expand, you know.
Right.
Plus also there's a new investor.
So this new demand that there is from IT and technology related, is that also likely to have the same knock-on impact with supply chain, or was that particular impact quite unique to heavier, more traditional manufacturing like automotive, as you discussed?
You mean the data center?
Yeah, likes of data centers, yeah.
Yeah, I think they are, each of them are having their own, you know, market, yeah. For manufacturing, consumer goods, they keep on going, and then supporting by the logistics, which is helping with the 3PL and everything. The data center, I think, is in parallel with the e-commerce, you know, because that's basically the backbone of the e-commerce, you know. So what's happened here is not only the consumer goods, I think consumer goods index going up, you know, but on the other hand, even though it's new, the e-commerce also is quite, you know, increased rapidly. And then if you see from China, the e-commerce is actually can be suddenly double, you know. So I see, you know, a lot of party, I mean, they prepare, if it's for e-commerce, then maybe they prepare like twice as what they need. You know.
Yeah. Okay. Then there's a question coming from Lucas asking about whether you've seen much increase in demand relating to cold chain and fresh produce related activity.
Okay. You mean cold chains, meaning cold storage or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, yes. Even though the market is right now is not big, but the one that I heard in the market is actually the market for cold storage is quite healthy. You know. The only thing is the investment is quite high, because when you buy the property, then the type of building is not standard as like a warehouse, in which when it is empty, you can just right away switch to other tenant. You know. So in terms of the cold chains or this one is actually, to me, is something that also potentially growing, you know, because if the food is growing, the cold chains also potentially will be growing as well. You know.
Yeah. Okay. Just this move from Tangerang to Central Java, just how, I mean, we've all moved house and things like that, or even moved office. How easy is it for a factory to move?
Definitely, I think Central Java, if you're talking about labor intensive, for sure they're going to go there, because it's almost like 50% of what is in Greater Jakarta. So the labor intensive like garment or textile, shoes manufacturing, they cannot compete with these, you know, automotive, you know. because the automotive is probably the highest in the list of the minimum wage. So definitely I start seeing, you know, like almost every time when people actually shifting their factories, you know, from Tangerang, from you know, Greater Jakarta, and then they right away move to Central Java. The only challenge is the infrastructure, because if you compare the infrastructure with Greater Jakarta, I mean, Central Java basically is still way behind, you know. And then the second one as well, sometimes they also need, you know, the skillful, you know, labor, in which in Jakarta is already, you know, much better compared to the productivity compared to the Central Java labor. You know. But definitely I see, you know, there is a trend and you know, shifting right away from Greater Jakarta going to Central Java.
Okay, and I'd like to stay with you, Rivan. Obviously, we are still in the midst of this global pandemic, COVID. At the heart of combating it has been mandating businesses, manufacturing, and so on to practices and standards relating to distancing and so on. As a services organization, to what extent are you providing advice to your clients? Also, is it going to make a difference going forward in terms of need for more space? And just how will that work for an organization? Because the space that's needed is to a large degree unproductive, potentially redundant. A number of questions there, really, Rivan, related to the phase that we're in now and the changes that are being forced upon business and manufacturing.
Yeah. I think it's only talking about adjustment, yeah, because everybody should adjust, you know, after this COVID-19. So in terms of the procedure of the factory, that definitely, you know, they have no choice basically. For the factory, they have to follow the procedure, you know, the SOP. And that's why I explained that the 4.0 become the options, you know, because then if you have to make a distance and everything, then that's actually a trigger for a factory to start, you know, implementing the automation and everything, so that with that situation they can adapt, you know, with the social distancing and everything, but they still can keep the output or the product of their manufacturing keep on going, you know. So I think that's the tip from mine is basically looking for other, you know, alternative in which you should maximize your existing operation to keep up with the same level, you know, even though you have to practicing all the SOP. You know.
So just to be clear, Rivan, your organization, Colliers, are able to work with your clients to try and help them and guide them in this regard?
Yes. I mean, we can help with the finding the properties or with all the requirements, the detailed requirements. I mean, we are capable and we have the experience of doing that.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to invite a few closing remarks. First of all, from Benny. Benny, what can we expect from Cikarang Dry Port in terms of it's already established in this particular market, but your expansion in this particular market?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So yeah, we have a blueprint actually to expanding this, to make it duplicate this kind of the dry port in Central Java, also in East Java. Central Java, we are doing a lot. Now is on the final stage. And in Cikarang itself, actually, we are adding more infrastructure, especially for we call it the Industrial 4.0. This is not only the technology that we put it partially, but is integrated with the custom, with the tax, with the quarantine. So you have full visibility from where you are. Even you don't have the office in Jakarta, but you can control, for example, from UK, you can control all this kind of flow of the document and even the payment you can release from UK. This kind of things that we already run and already show to our global customer that we have the capability to do it. Following the question from Pak Lucas, I think it's about the cold storage. Yes, it's a high demand now for cold storage. Even the high investment, but the return also is quite high for the cold storage. And we facing also this kind of demand, not only the cold storage, but the integrated cold storage, meaning from the processing, the cleaning, storage, and even the packaging. So the client can receive the final end even to their housing, or maybe in the shelving of the supermarket. So I think it's a promising market for Indonesia. But as long this kind of the pandemic can be controlled by the government, the new normal, we call it the new normal, must be put. It's not a normal thing actually. We must put in the mind of everybody. It's the distancing, put a mask, and so on. But yeah, we believe we're quite positive on this situation, that the demand is still there.
Okay, thank you. Rivan, we're running out of time now. I'd like to invite a few closing remarks from yourself based on the discussion that we've had today.
Okay, for me, even though maybe my slogan will be, don't be too negative about what's going on, because there is hope at the end of the road. You know? That's my final statement. Thank you.
All right. So with that, thank you both very much. Rivan representing Colliers, Benny representing Cikarang Dry Port, and our discussion around the industrial land, industrial estates. I think this is a discussion that we can continue, particularly in the context of Indonesia and its readiness to compete, to take some of that business that inevitably will be leaving China and looking to move to somewhere in Southeast Asia. To our questioners, if I didn't get round to asking your particular question, please accept my apologies. Thanks to those who came on and asked their questions personally. And really that just leaves me to remind you of what's coming up. Actually, we've got a pretty hectic schedule. On Monday, we look at British expertise in the context of education and human capital standards. Another particular thing in terms of soft infrastructure for Indonesia, which needs to continue to develop if it's going to compete regionally. And that's with the standards body NOCN, their managing director, global CEO, sorry, and David Butcher, who's the principal of the British School in Jakarta. On the 2nd of July, we are delighted to welcome again the Professional Women's Group of Britcham, and they will be discussing changes to consumer behavior in the new normal. That's in the context of malls reopening and a huge shift over the last 4, 6, 8 weeks to e-commerce and getting stuff delivered. So what will be needed to get consumer confidence back and to get people spending, something that Indonesia will need to address very, very soon, given all the financial incentives that have been made by the government in support of people confronted with challenges with COVID. In terms of the British government and its support of renewable energies and projects development, particularly in some of the more remote areas of Indonesia, on July the 7th, we look at what incentives are available to help both Indonesian and other international companies make a project that doesn't look too bankable, rather more bankable. And we recommence our environmental series on July the 9th with a meeting about corporate climate commitments and the role of forest restoration projects, and all of this in the context of COP26, which is being hosted in Scotland in the United Kingdom next year. That's July the 9th, and 3 very senior figures joining us with a great deal of experience. With that, once again, I notice we have a lot of non-members joining this particular webinar. Please do expect my team to have a pitch at you and try and get you as members, so that you can be regularly rubbing shoulders with people like Benny and Rivan. So please do respond positively to that when it comes. And also, it's great to see, I think more than 90% of the people on are actually our Indonesian friends as well. So great to see the diversity in the interest in BritCham Indonesia. With all of that, thanks to my team. Thanks again, Rivan, Colliers, Benny, Cikarang, Dryport, to you for giving up your time, and keep an eye on these other webinars. And when the recording of this comes out, please post it far and wide. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.